But nothing could have prepared her for the story that was about to walk through her door. The bell chimed weakly as a small figure pushed against the glass door, struggling against the wind. Clara looked up, ready to call out that they were closing, but the words died in her throat. Standing in the doorway was a boy no more than 10 years old, soaked to the bone. His clothes hung off his skeletal frame like rags on a scarecrow, and his bare feet left wet prints on the checkered linoleum. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold, dark, hollow, and filled with a hunger that went far deeper than an empty stomach. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. "I haven't eaten in 3 days." Clara's heart shattered into a million pieces. She'd seen hard times before. This was Detroit. After all, a city that knew struggle intimately. But something about this child struck a chord deep within her soul. Maybe it was the way he stood there, trembling but proud. Not quite begging, but not too proud to ask. Maybe it was the memory of her own son. Taken too soon by illness, who would have been about this age? "Come here, baby," she said softly, grabbing a clean towel from behind the counter. "Let's get you dried off and fed." The boy hesitated, as if kindness was a foreign language he'd forgotten how to speak. Then slowly he stepped forward. Clara wrapped the towel around his shaking shoulders and guided him to a booth, the one by the heater where she always sat during her breaks. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked, already moving toward the kitchen. "Marcus," he replied, his teeth chattering. "Marcus Webb." Clara worked quickly, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She wasn't supposed to give away food. Her boss, Mr. Henderson, had made that clear when she'd helped a homeless woman last month. But as she piled a plate high with meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, and fresh bread, she decided some rules were meant to be broken. When she set the plate in front of Marcus, his eyes went wide. He looked at the food, then at her, then back at the food, as if waiting for the catch. "Go on," Clara encouraged, sliding into the booth across from him. "It's all yours." He ate like someone who didn't know when his next meal would come, barely pausing to breathe. Clara watched, her throat tight with emotion, and quietly prepared a second plate. As he ate, she learned his story in fragments between bites. His mother had died 2 years ago. His father had disappeared shortly after, drowning in grief and addiction. Marcus had been in and out of foster homes, each one worse than the last, until he'd run away 3 months ago, deciding the streets were safer than the places meant to protect him. "You got anywhere to sleep tonight?" Clara asked, already knowing the answer. Marcus shook his head, his eyes downcast. "There's an abandoned building on Porter Street. Some of us kids stay there sometimes." Clara made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Not tonight, you're not. You're coming home with me." Over Mr. Henderson's objections the next day, Clara worked out an arrangement. Marcus could help around the diner after school, bussing tables, washing dishes, in exchange for meals and a small allowance. She enrolled him in the local school, bought him clothes from the thrift store, and gave him the small spare room in her apartment that had sat empty since her son's death. But Clara gave Marcus something more valuable than food and shelter. She gave him hope. Every evening after the dinner rush, she'd sit with him at that same booth and help with his homework. She attended his school plays and parent-teacher conferences. She taught him to look people in the eye, to stand tall, to believe that his past didn't define his future. "You're smart, Marcus," she'd tell him, tapping his math homework with her finger. "So smart. You could do anything you want in this world." Marcus soaked up her words like parched earth drinking rain. He'd never had someone believe in him before. Never had someone see past the hungry, homeless boy to the person he could become. Under Clara's care, he flourished. His grades climbed from failing to honor roll. He devoured books from the library, teaching himself about business, technology, and economics. Years passed. Marcus graduated high school as valedictorian, his speech bringing tears to Clara's eyes as he thanked the woman who saved my life when she had every reason to walk past me. He earned a full scholarship to MIT, where his brilliance with computers and innovation caught the attention of venture capitalists. By 25, he'd founded a tech company that revolutionized mobile banking for underserved communities. By 30, his company had gone public, making him one of the youngest billionaires in America. But success didn't change Marcus. He called Clara every Sunday, no matter where in the world business took him. He offered to buy her a house, to let her retire in comfort, but she'd refused. Content with her diner and her simple life. "I don't need your money, baby," she'd say. "I just need to know you're happy." Then came the day Clara's world tilted on its axis. Mr. Henderson had sold the diner to a development company. They were tearing it down to build luxury condos, and at 67, Clara found herself unemployed and facing eviction from her rent-controlled apartment in the same building. She didn't tell Marcus. He had enough on his plate, she reasoned, running a billion-dollar company. She'd figure something out. She always did. But Marcus had built an empire on information, and when his weekly call went to voicemail 3 times in a row, he knew something was wrong. 2 days later, he stood outside the diner, his heart breaking at the closed sign in the window. He found Clara at her apartment, packing boxes with tears streaming down her face. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Oh, baby," she said, wiping her eyes. "You've got your own life now." I didn't want to be a burden. Marcus knelt beside her, taking her weathered hands in his. "A burden? Clara, you saved me. You gave me everything. Let me do this, please!" 3 months later, on the exact spot where the old diner had stood, a new building rose. But this wasn't luxury condos. It was the Clara Martinez Community Center, a gleaming facility offering free meals, job training, healthcare, and housing assistance to Detroit's homeless population. The crown jewel was a restored classic diner on the ground floor, run by Clara herself, where no one was ever turned away hungry. At the grand opening, Marcus stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd of dignitaries, press, and community members. But his eyes found Clara sitting in the front row, dabbing at her tears with a tissue. 27 years ago, he began, his voice strong and clear. I walked into a diner on the worst night of my life. I was hungry, cold, and convinced the world had nothing good left to offer. But a woman named Clara Martinez proved me wrong. She didn't see a homeless kid. She saw a human being worth saving. And in saving me, she taught me the most important lesson I've ever learned, that kindness is never wasted, that compassion costs nothing but means everything, and that sometimes the smallest act of love can change the entire trajectory of a life. He paused, his eyes glistening. I stand here today not because I'm smart or lucky, but because someone chose to see me when the world looked away. This center isn't charity. It's a promise that every person who walks through these doors will be seen, valued, and given the chance I was given, because everyone deserves a Clara Martinez in their corner. As the crowd erupted in applause, Marcus walked to Clara and embraced her. "Thank you," he whispered, "for teaching me that the measure of wealth isn't what you have, but what you give." Clara held him tight, this boy who'd become a man, who'd taken the love she'd given and multiplied it 1,000-fold. "No, baby," she said softly. "Thank you for reminding me why I opened that door on that rainy night. Some people come into our lives for a reason. You were always meant to be my blessing, too." Outside, the rain began to fall, gentle and cleansing. But inside the Clara Martinez Community Center, there was only warmth, hope, and the unshakable truth that kindness, once planted, grows in ways we can never imagine, returning to us multiplied, transformed, and more beautiful than we ever dreamed possible.